You don't care. Hello and welcome to TMR podcast number 4, Open Source Technology.
On top of old Horror
Brought to you
Hill,
by our
in a
sponsor,
secret
Integrated
laboratory,
Nature and Zero
Professor
Fluoride
Weirdo
Water
and Count Kook
Chris.
were in their monstrous glory.
Today we're going to present a concept that, on its own, has the capacity to solve most of the major global problems. And then we're talking about the financial crisis that's going on that is so pronounced in Europe and Greece. We're talking about environmental problems, of food production, starvation, overfishing, soil depletion, and obviously, with the great hope of housing and feeding all the 1 billion impoverished people around the world. Now, these are big claims, and I'd say that about 40 minutes into this podcast, why we make them is going to start to make some sense. But now, hang in there with us. I guess a good place to introduce this topic would be to just touch on the topics we've covered. Our second podcast was about the patent system, and we more or less explained how the patent system holds back innovation. How the fact that these technologies are owned funnels about 4 times as many resources into lawyers, patenting, bureaucrats, rather than research and development. Mm-hmm. How small inventors simply cannot afford to patent their invention and in a sense have to sell it out to bigger corporations rather than carry it on themselves. So patent system stifles innovation and it holds technology back because, Chris, if you bring that iPhone forward, only Apple can improve on that iPhone. It's an amazing piece of technology.
Yeah, but it has its flaws.
Exactly. If that was open source,
it would be an incredible piece of technology.
It would be an incredible piece of technology because looking at that open source printer over there, unlike the Apple iPhone, if I want to change one component to make it better, if I wanted to make adding a USB connection to that iPhone, I can forget about it. Adding a new screen with a different property, I could forget about it. Only Apple could do such things. You can't modify standardly
hardware.
You can't modify proprietary software and proprietary hardware. That covers the patent system. And then there is inbuilt obsolescence, which is that every company has an incentive to make stuff that is really suboptimal in quality because it means spare parts. It means new purchases in the future. And if, we're gonna define open source in a minute, but just imagine if everybody had the design files and let's say you have a bike with bad bearings.
You could repair it.
And if that bearing was a standard bearing, you could just buy a bearing from a different manufacturer and you'd never have that problem again. If you had some customized part that they charge hundreds of dollars for and you had the design files, you could get it manufactured at the local fab shop. So the idea of open source technology, which, I'll expand on this definition, it's defined as in production and development, open source is a philosophy or pragmatic methodology that promotes free distribution and access to an end product design and implementation details. Chris, effectively this means let's pick up that iPhone again. Just imagine you could go online and get the specs and the design files on every piece of this iPhone. So if you wanted a new button, you'd get the exact dimensions, material specs, and quotes from the original supplier. You could order one yourself. You could make one yourself. You could make a new button, different button. Likewise for the screen. Likewise for the camera.
And so, come back to the software as well.
Yeah, and the software, you would be able to write an app. See, the way Apple works is you have to buy their development code. You have to pay thousands of dollars to kind of become a part of this Apple.
No.
Yeah.
Surely not.
Yeah. So you need to jump through like 5, a whole series of hoops to even contribute to Apple. And then at the end of the day, they choose whether or not to approve your app.
Hoops of money?
Well, yeah. At every stage, you're paying for the privilege of developing. Now, the alternative is like Linux and Ubuntu. And you can actually download all the code, all the software that makes up the operating system. And, if you want, You can change the sequence of what that thing processes. You could edit the software to run on, weaker computers or stronger computers. You can, if you understand the nitty gritty things, you can improve it considerably. Or if you just want to add certain apps, like let's say, I don't know, I want to create I'm in Windows, or I'm in Ubuntu, or some Linux software.
Yep.
And I'd like my desktop to be a world map and time zones of all the places where my friends are.
Yes.
And live Facebook feeds or whatever, Twitter feeds or whatever my friends are saying at the moment. I could actually build that without too much specialized knowledge. If I understand basic programming language in which it's built, it's not an exceedingly difficult thing.
But with that system also, can't you take a part of what someone else has already developed?
Absolutely.
And then modify that?
That would probably be the way to go about it. At the end of the day, if you could even articulate this idea, like I'd like to build this thing, you could go online in forums of, thousands and thousands of Linux users, and even if you're some dude with this, wouldn't that be cool, like instead of a desktop I'd have this thing, you actually have a pretty reasonable chance of finding people that can help you develop it, of finding people that
fantastic. It's all about community.
And if you think about, I guess more importantly, how open source, what's a good example of open source? We've mentioned only one, that's Linux. Another is Wikipedia. It's people without a full-time job doing it. The people without necessarily professional skills in the database management and encyclopedias, just contributing something that they particularly know a lot about from all around the world. Open source platform, like people get together and they just I'd like to write an article on skateboarding in the 70s because that's what I grew up in, and all of a sudden, nobody in alternative encyclopedia would have that expertise that opening up a platform to millions of people has.
I've read encyclopedia.
And Wikipedia is the best encyclopedia on the planet.
Well, the other good thing about too with Wikipedia is that when my father bought me the encyclopedia in the 80s, everything in it was from 1960. It was already 20 years old. But so at least with Wikipedia, you're constantly getting the old and the updated.
Yeah.
And we know that technology is always updated and as news comes about. So I think it's a fantastic tool in anything where you can see the technology as it moves through.
Well, and, we mentioned Linux, and I'm going back to it. It's apparently used by like 90% of Wall Street companies for creating customized databases of information for their servers. So just the software developed by a couple thousand sort of average Joes in their free time, tinkering, trying to create an operating system, does a far superior job than the billions of dollars that Microsoft and Oracle had at their disposal.
Well,
and just visualize this idea. So the very act of publishing your progress as you're working on an engineering project, doing it in small iterations, letting the whole world know, hey, this is what I created, and making it available to millions of other people who can just take it, slightly tweak it, make it better, who can add something that complement to it. The model of actually sharing your knowledge, sharing your progress.
No company could spend that sort of money on R&D.
Yeah. And it's proven itself, at least so far in software, to be a far superior method of developing complex technologies, complex products. And if you think about it, it's hard to even call it a method. It's like the absence of patenting. You're not. The only act is you're sharing your progress.
Yeah, but you're hoping someone will take it and then modify it and make it better than what it was.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's complementing your work.
And I mean, like, in our case, your case, the zero fluoride water filter, we've on the show publicly agreed to make all the design files public in a year from now.
Yeah.
Like, actually, like 11 months and something. The point is, what is likely to result in it? Well, if this filter is, say, the best there is in this particular category, somebody that manufactures white goods and products may eventually, people may make a few at home and somebody may eventually pick it up and then make it on a grander scale. And obviously, as a financially interested party, you're likely to lose out. But then again, you're likely to become the inventor of something that fundamentally, say, changes the filtration industry. All of a sudden, that makes that gives you access to huge amounts of opportunities, that makes people interested in your very next product. It'll allow you to get funding. You can...
well, the person who takes it might actually develop it and make it work better than what it does now by introducing other stuff into it. Then I could do it again, make it work even better again, and then he can't... There's no way he can come back and sue me.
And we didn't mention the people. I mean, now the people would pay $150 for a solution that filters, 7,000 liters that gets rid of the fluoride. They'd pay $150 and, you'd make a modest profit out of that. 5 years from now, because you shared your knowledge, your technology, that is probably going to cost $30.
Oh, yeah.
And, if you imagine that applied to a personal computer, imagine that applied to a car, a fridge, a washing machine. Like, you would have this exponential increase in quality and exponential decrease in price for all products because, and at the end of the day, the people that would be recognized, the people that would get the credit, the future funding, the recognition, wouldn't be the guy that owns the company that makes the washing machines because, well, everybody's making washing machines because everybody's sharing technology. It'd be the guy that invented.
Well, I wouldn't say the word invent. I'd say develop.
Developed.
Yeah.
Now, let's get some structure to this podcast. From this point, we're going to cover 9 existing open source projects. And after, we tell you a little bit about it, we're going to put the links in the description. We may put them live on the screen depending upon how much time I have to edit this thing. And we're going to speculate a little bit on what a long-term outcome of a flourishing of open source project would be. What kind of world would we live in? So first up, we've got the Arduino. Now, the Arduino is a programmable controller. It's you can think of it like a miniature computer. It's a brain. It gives a very cheap, like $30, $35 component that can give automation to some project that you're working on. Let's say, Chris, here's like a typical idea. You have some building equipment, like, I don't know, a cement mixer.
Yes.
You can build a device like a cube that goes on top of it with a solar panel, some batteries, a light sensor, and every time darkness falls, this thing can light up, run its own power. It has a certain, sense of automation. It's just like...
Could measure moisture content in the cement, could tell you how many revolutions the mixer's done. It could work out consistency, I suppose, in the mix. If there's enough clay in there, if there's enough cement in there.
Brilliant example. So
it's like you could take a low-tech device and you could give it all these sensor inputs, and that would allow you to be able to make a more consistent product, I suppose, in that way.
No, you're precisely right. I know very little about cement mixers. Now you know something, and you but you hit up, because I thought something you'd know about, and you hit up like 5 examples where automation can considerably improve it.
Well, we look at the basic combustion engine, right? There's nothing special about it, but today we have combustion engines that have probably up to, I've seen some of them running like 50 sensors on them, feeding back to a computer, telling you where everything is in the motor at any one time. And not that that's needed to make the engine run, but it also makes it easier to diagnose what's wrong with the car. Why did it stop? Why did the engine stop running? And not only that too, with those sensors feeding back all that information, we can also work out wear and tear on the motor, life expectancy. We can also alter stuff. We can alter parts of the engine to get more efficiency out of it, which we could never do before because we didn't know exactly what was going on in there. And self-diagnosis all the time.
The idea is you're adding intelligence and information to systems that never had it before. And then, I mean, you fix up cars, hot rods, and modify engines. And if you know that the temperature of the cooling fluid is the best indicator for when your engine's about to go bust, it'd be really, really cheap and easy for you to add a sensor and have a live display in your car of that temperature. It'd be pretty...
Or auto shut-off of the engine so it wouldn't explode.
You'd be able to, you can think of a board. Actually, I'm going to get up and bring my Arduino to just show the crowd what it looks like.
Well, I think you're getting more efficiency out of the product because you're bringing in all these extra probes.
So, this is an Arduino Mega, and this is a USB. You connect that to your computer. You connect sensors to this line. You can connect both. I mean, these are pins that can connect both sensors and output devices like solenoids, LEDs, lights. So you can go, okay, when it's really bright, turn the motor, lower the blinds in this room. When it's really dark, turn the motor, open up the blinds in this room. That program would be about that long, and a 10-year-old kid could write it, and you could have like a 10-year-old kid creating something valuable in your own house.
Well, that's fantastic.
That was and 5 years ago, Chris, this technology was accessible to 0.5% of the global population who had not only engineering degrees, but jobs in companies that dealt with automation. And now it's up there for everybody.
But that's fantastic, because back when I was a young lad, all we had was like the kits we used to get from Dick Smith or Radio Shack, where you'd build a wireless crystal set. But all you were doing was working on the hardware. There was never any software or software programming. But this is incredible. I mean, this is really high-tech stuff.
And I mean, the price drop has been exponential. I remember in 2008, this is not a very long time ago, we were working on a project where we're doing macerators. Essentially, we're macerating sewage for oil rig platforms in the middle of the ocean. And we basically had this thing when it would get stuck, we'd run it in reverse. If it gets stuck again, we'd run it in reverse double, and if it gets stuck the third time, it would stop and call send a message to the control board. Chris, that cost us $6,000. That's all it did. That cost us $6,000. I, despite being qualified to do that, did not have access to the proprietary software and the a whole variety of electronic devices. And
what would that cost today, Sonny? With that board?
About 100.
It's
so
incredible.
6,000 to 100. That is 600. No, it's actually 60,000% decrease in price. So you can just imagine a capacity to add feedback and intelligence to any part of your life. And I mean, looking out at my garden, the project I'm working on at the moment is automating the watering using an Arduino. And again, it'll be like an open source kit when we're finished with it. And we've already built something that works, but we're trying to kick the batteries out of the system. So essentially, at sunset. It has a clock. It knows the time of the day at sunset when the right time to water is. It measures the humidity in the ground, the temperature in the air, and it doses the exactly right amount of water to the plants. Now, if that could be independent to the point where a solar cell charges a battery which runs this, and the solenoid is under pressure plugged into a hose, which you never have to close. Essentially, there's an under pressure hose which closes and opens at the right times, and the water gets dosed. I believe that our first prototype without any charging cost about $80, maybe for 150 to 200. We should be able to get a device that, you know, leaves watering. I spend 25 minutes a day watering my garden. You know, 25 minutes times 365 days is 150 hours or something like that. You know, 150 hours at an average salary in Australia. I mean, we're talking $4,000 here, you know. So I'm capable of creating $4,000 worth of value.
Mm-hmm. You can employ Pablo.
You know, for $200, and it doesn't take that many specialized skills. I mean, you're like literally writing, oh, if the temperature is between this and that, then turn this one for this many seconds. If it's between this and that, turn it on for that many seconds. It's not, this isn't string theory physics. It's not relativity. It's not that complex.
It's not binary.
No, you know, it's not machine code. It actually, when you read it, if you put it in front of a 10-year-old kid and ask the kid, well, what do you think this does? He'd have some clue.
It's got to be basic.
It is basic. And this is, you know, probably one of the most empowering technologies. And which moves us to the second one, again, which is in the house. I think I can like use the camera to film it. We're going to run it in the last 15 minutes of this podcast. The reason why we're not running it now is it makes a little bit of noise. And, you know, we like our viewers to enjoy a high quality audio environment. But yeah, right over there. Hi, Chris. Right over there is the 3D printer. Here's the cam view. And we're going to be running it towards the end, and Chris is going to film the screen, and we're going to show you how simple 3D printer is to run. But that 3D printer over there is, again, a relatively simple device. If you look at what a printer does on a piece of paper, it goes in a two-dimensional pattern and lays down some ink. And that ink goes in the shape of the letters that you're writing.
I don't know if anyone's ever seen, well, there should be a lot of people out there who've seen Star Trek, and they've seen what a replicator does. It uses carbon atoms to replicate products.
Yeah.
Say that's the theory. Well, a 3D printer, to me, it looks like the very caveman early version of that.
Yeah.
You're building a 3D model using dots, like a printer. And, as I said, the printer goes like that. You just add one more dimension to the printer. Instead of 2 dimensions, it lifts up and it lays layers of plastic. And off it goes and lays out 3-dimensional shapes. Now, I can... well, I'm getting up like a lot today. This is what I'm working on at the moment, and we'll be printing Generation 2. You have to hold up the camera there, Sonny.
That is a customized bracket. I have outside, we're building an aquaponic system, which has literally barrels staying up above the pool. But now these barrels that are cut in half, when they're full of water, they sag sideways. So we needed like some special device that would hold them, you know, be exactly the right thickness, have exactly the right gaps, have the curvature of the barrel in it, to hold these barrels in place. It's impossible to buy something like that, and, you know, just a couple of years ago, to get it custom built, whether you paid
look, I know a little bit about tooling. Right?
Yeah.
And to build this product with tooling, I know there's not much tooling under 10 grand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
yeah.
even I know this looks basic to everyone. It's just a block with a couple of slides in it, but 10 grand worth of tooling to manufacture, and then the only reason why you go that tooling anyway is you're going to manufacture in mass, right? So who has the money to do that? Corporations, big companies, who are going to build a widget that they know that they can use on multiple applications.
Otherwise, you'd have to make it out of metal and get some guy to like manually cut this out, or even whatever, use a CNC router 5 years ago. We're talking to solve this particular problem for my garden, several $1,000s at minimum. Now, this one particularly, the gaps aren't quite perfect, and this is generation 1. We'll be printing generation 2 towards the end of this podcast. Now, I've calculated how much this cost me, even, using the power of the motors, and about 70 cents. About 70 cents each. Now, if I wanted to build one without a 3D printer, I think the cheapest I'd go is several $100s.
I think so.
And
because then it would come down to volume.
It would come down to volume. You'd have some guy have to handcraft it, some guy have to draw it, and to do this, the printer is entirely open source. So every component on that printer is a standardized component. The bearings are a standard size bearing that you could buy in any bearing shop. It's not something that the company makes. That only that
We've
company
talked about
has.
this in the patent system.
The motors are standard stepper motors. The extruder is a specialized thing, but it's cheap, and they've already come up with the next generation. And much of that printer is made out of printed parts. So I personally can look at it and make something better than it already is, and use my part. Now, you already have intelligent electronics that add intelligence to like various parts of machines, daily inventions, your house, your garden, whatever, the roads. This is quite important. They build objects. You can. I busted a engine cap on my car, and I'm thinking I need to drive it to the mechanic, even though it'll take me 15 minutes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to print with my 3D printer.
Very smart.
An engine cap.
Why not?
And the mechanic is probably going to have the original, but it'll definitely do the job for the day. So like little things that come up in your house, you can personally design solutions. It's a lot of fun. And all of these electronics need housings. They need like waterproof, watertight housings. And that's what 3D printer is providing. Now, we've already covered automation, like basic intelligence devices, 3D printing. Next one up is the paralleller. Now, look this up online. This is essentially a $99 supercomputer. It is going to be the size close to this Arduino. It'll actually be pretty much the precise size of a credit card. And it will have the processing power, the raw processing power of a, top-of-the-line PC that costs, minus the screen and the editors, it costs about $1,800 for $99. The creators have basically open-sourced everything on the board. There's only some circuits like on the main chip that are proprietary, but the entire board, so they've built a computer with extreme processing power for next to nothing, and it's all open source. So somebody in China is most likely going to pick it up, and within a year they'll be selling them for $30. And now, why does this matter? Why do we need like little tiny supercomputers? Well, you got two eyes, Chris. If you close one, you'd be a very bad judge of depth. You'd probably walk into some obstacles, and your two eyes create three-dimensional space.
Yep.
The computational power of taking two video images, two-dimensional video images, and constructing. I mean, this is done by doing, millions of matrix calculations. It takes a supercomputer to do such a thing.
Yep.
If this becomes cheap, the dream of that robot that goes around the house and does your chores begins to be possible. Because now he can orient himself in that three-dimensional space. And I mean, you mentioned to me that you had this idea for a vacuum cleaner that, would be the next big thing. Like,
Well, I mean, everyone likes a clean house, and no one. And if you ever want to talk about a time-wasting device, vacuuming a house is the most mundane and time-wasting job you'll ever do, I think, personally. So, a robot that can read the environment constantly. He can tell you if something's moved from one spot to another. He can even evaluate, has he ever vacuumed in that spot in the last 3 days? And it can go straight to that spot. As soon as you move a chair, it goes, I haven't vacuumed there. That's where I got to go next. These are going to make these, what we had robots in the past that were very basic pieces of junk into robots that can almost think for themselves. I'm not talking about emotions.
Yeah. But we're beginning in the next part of the podcast. We're going to be projecting these 5 years, 10 years into the future, and saying like, well, if we support open source technology, what type of societies will we get? But you're already getting a picture where you personally have the power. Now, if not you, it's not Apple, it's not Microsoft. It's not Google. It's like the guy down the street at worst, like within all of us is the capacity to modify technology to do extremely useful things in our own lives. To provide for our needs.
It's something to make life better for everybody. I mean, I understand this whole thing is I invented it. It's my idea. I want to profit from it. But if you give it out to everyone and everyone does well out of it, it just becomes better for you anyway.
Oh, and if everybody does better of it, if let's say, whatever, a conservative number, not even 100, like 1 million people have their lives noticeably improved because of something you invented, like that is going to open up so many doors and opportunities for you. And then those people will be more than happy to back the next thing that you're about to try to do. You'll make 1 million friends, man.
Yeah, but I'm going to go a little bit off topic here, right? And I know Sonny doesn't like me when I go off topic, but I am. Could you imagine if you had millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And you're living in a really nice house and you have really nice cars, yet all your neighbours live in a slum. And every day you get in your car and you drive out of your house and you're looking at these people and they're doing it hard, right? And you're doing it easy. Well, wouldn't it be better if you gave out that technology and everyone was doing good, or you still might be doing better than them, but everyone was living in a nice neighborhood. Everyone has nice houses, nice technology. Wouldn't it be better if everyone had the same? I mean, you would be better for it.
It is a rhetorical question almost because we're humans, we're social creatures, and if you don't have friends, if you don't have people with your best interest at heart,
well, $1 million house in the middle of a slum, you're not going to have many friends.
Exactly. If you can't look to the eye to eye with another human being and go, man, honestly, what do you think about this? Do you want to do something together? Like that type of feedback that you get from people. I mean, it's like an essential thing to being a human being. And no, like a guy living in a mansion in the middle of a slum is not going to have many friends. It'd be like a very lonely, miserable existence. So I think it's, a much better world for everybody would be one where as many people are well off as humanly possible. And, people say the idea of socialism is you take money and by some mechanism, and usually it's the force of the state, you take money from people who have it and you give money to the people that don't. And there is this administrative... No, hear me out. There is this with money.
Yeah, but it's not about money.
Exactly, but with money, somebody actually has to go and make rules and then take it and distribute it, and you've got to have all these people in all these powerful positions to have all these high morals. It's too many ifs, it's too many ways this thing can go wrong. If high-tech technology is the standard, the global, the norm is just like, yeah, man, like you make something and you put the design files up and you share that, like that gives everybody access to tools that create an abundance. You don't need you don't need administrators. You don't need people to collect taxes and then redistribute it. You need government programs. Like you yourself in your own home are the source of your wealth. And like
You're doing
getting
it
access.
yourself.
Yes.
You're doing it yourself, and you got to understand too is from the government's point of view is how can they tax you if you've got a 3D printer like we have over here, manufacturing products in your home? How are they going to get their money?
They're not.
It's hilarious.
You know, we're gonna talk about precisely. We're gonna continue on the tangent that we've gone on, and we're gonna expand on it. But before we do that, we're just gonna mention two more open source products. I mean, quadcopters and drones. I just looked at this thing called Crazy Fly. It's
Fantastic.
and again, entirely open source, $150 dollar. That's what it's selling for. Drone. It flies with extreme speed, extreme agility. It's remote controlled. You can modify it because it's open source in 1,000 ways to carry out lights in front of you, to carry cameras, to record. And if these drones are getting exponentially cheaper, I mean, pretty soon you'll have them delivering your letters. Like, they'd be so much more efficient, so much quicker than, say, a postman. You know, you'd have it changes so many like social ideas and social norms.
I mean, look at a postman, right?
Yeah.
It's really a mundane job. It's
Yeah.
like vacuuming. I mean, come on. You know, delivering the mail. Do you think that's satisfying for someone? I think it's satisfying that he got you what you know, what someone sent you, but the whole job is just a boring, basic job. You know, it's like vacuuming. I suppose it's vacuuming. You know, it's the same thing to me.
And well, the next one was the mesh network. You know, looking at that iPhone, it's very possible, given that we have all these devices that can send information and receive information. They could be nodes in a network, and rather than having this internet, which is a centralized cable thing that's laid down by the government infrastructure, you could have all these devices connect and talk to each other in a way that
bouncing off one another.
Yeah, bouncing off one another in a way that you have this internet that can never go down. Like, it is every time you turn on a device, whether it's a laptop or a phone or a computer with wireless networking, it's threatening the network.
I love this idea. I mean, this is one of the ones that I've been trying to get into, but remember, I'm a little bit older than than a lot of people are probably watching this program. But I just find that this technology is so out there. It's so fantastic, and I can see the implications of it, and how it's going to change everything, and it's going to decentralize the decentralizing of the phone system. Any company that gets in there and tries to control it, they can't. They can't shut. I mean, it'd be really hard to shut down a mesh network system, because if they shut down one section, it bounces off a new section. You know, like it's a constant, especially with the way a lot of devices now, right down to washing machines, are Bluetooth. I mean, your washing machine could be bouncing a signal for you from one device to the next.
Which basically, now we're gonna. How are we going with time? We're going all right. Our next up is open source ecology. So everything we mentioned, the 5 examples, Arduino, 3D printing, Parallella, quadcopters, the mesh network, this is all gadgety stuff. And the open source ideals are going beyond, first it was software. We talked about software a bit. Now this is all electronics and hardware. And they're going even beyond that. You have projects like open source ecology, where people are using open source to build brick presses, tractors, plows, like farm equipment, houses, essentially everything that civilization takes to exist. And these guys are doing it for the average of like 10% cost of what industry has. And they have these very basic, very commonsensical, smart ideas, like, a power cube. You have a module that runs a
hydraulic power pack.
They have it an electric one, they have a diesel one, and they have a petrol one.
Yes. So
whatever you need, how much, depending on the power and torque ratios. But you can have the same device act as the engine for your tractor, act as the engine for your car, act as the engine for your mechanical plow,
I suppose
for
you
your
could say,
brick press.
I suppose you could say it's a multi-fit system. It's component driven. You take one thing out, you put another thing in. It's very basic.
And so, if you're to do it the open source way, it literally costs 10%. And these guys, with the basic workshop, And essentially, crowdfunding are making this happen. Like the brick press that they developed is quite possibly one of the best brick presses on planet Earth. You know, the notion of rocking up to an empty field with a trailer worth of equipment and just going all out ahead,
Punching out a house.
punching out a house is now so much more possible. I guess to do it, you know, properly, you'd need some flat foundations. But you know, what would that take? Several $1,000s. And...
Oh, look, it's expensive. You know, anyone who's ever bought a house knows what it costs. I mean, it's an expensive thing. But what I find great too, I think a lot of people don't realise is that when this product gets out there, this open source technology gets out there, it's going to be made to last, right? People aren't going to start building stuff that's going to break. I mean, why would you?
It doesn't. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't. If it's open source, you're not the guy that's making all of them, and you're not the guy that's selling all of them. I mean, you're making some, and millions of other people around the world are making their own. And the idea is you make it the best you possibly can.
And what comes with that, on the back of that, is just think of like if you hire a piece of equipment, right, from a hire place. You say I want a brick press. I want to hire a brick press to build my house, right? Well, think about that, but without paying the rent on it. All you got to do is feed the resources, and you get the product on the other side. I mean, that's where it's going to go, because we don't need to build one. We don't have to personally have one for ourselves, right? We can lend these things out. We know they don't break. They work. They're consistent. They're easy to work. You don't have to be a scientist or an engineer to make the thing work.
Easy to repair.
Easy to repair.
If the trouble would say, when you say landing sharing stuff, you know, so you give someone your blender and your blender goes busto. Your blender is gone. The $150 that you paid for it are gone. But
it's throwaway. But
if I lend my 3D printer to somebody and it comes back broken, you know, the most expensive part costs $25. They'd be like, if I knew that the worst that can happen is that I lose, 5% of the value of the device, that's the worst repair cost. It takes the barriers down that we have for sharing.
But you also know that you can buy those bearings, you can buy those bits off multiple companies. It's not like you have to go back to the original supplier who's got a licensing agreement where he can make a maximum profit out of that particular product. So no, it's fantastic, and I think it's going to bring down those barriers too. Sharing equipment that that's not from the $2 Chinese shop that's going to snap the day after you. The first time you use it.
Of course, there is the issue of you are building equipment out of standardized components, and the company that makes the motors, for example, that are used in this open source printer, that company may not be open source. That company may be building out motors, but they're building a standard size which 10 other companies are building. So there is
there's competition.
There is competition there, but you got to realize also that it has to infiltrate. It starts off at the top system.
Mm-hmm.
You build an open source device from standardized components that exist. These standardized components themselves are not open source, but themselves are still at a much improved level compared to the Apple iPhone. There isn't, if you're building let's say you're buying a bearing, and there is, size 3/4 inch, this wide.
You're saying you're buying a generic, a very well used.
If you're buying a generic bearing,
yes,
the company that makes those bearings actually has an incentive to make a better bearing than they normally would, because there's 10 other companies making that exact same bearing.
That's right.
And so it is being sourced, in a sense, from a higher quality standard of products, engineering-wise.
Because that's the only way they can go to sell that product.
Because they're standardized. And the next thing, I'd imagine, is if the top level is open source, the bottom level is standardized, well, the mid-level standardized, the open source is going to proliferate downwards into the product design, and you're going to have, open source motors coming out soon.
Well, you're going to have a high efficiency, high capacity, at a lot lower price.
Yeah. And what's our next one? WikiSpeed. You've just seen a video on that. It's an open source car. They managed, in USA, 100 miles. They made 100 miles to a gallon sports car, literally built in a garage by people like knocking things together. I think it costs something like $20,000.
Pretty good.
It is high performance. You know, it is like a I don't know, what do you like, roadster essentially.
Yeah, it's two-door, two-seater or something like that. Sports car. But it's also modular because you can convert it into a ute truck. You can pull the body off with, I think he said 8 bolts. You can take the body off and put a ute body on there and cart around equipment. And then you can also put another body on there, which makes it a 4-door passenger car. So if you want to go and drop people off at the airport or whatever you want to do, it becomes that. So it's a modular car again. They
designed it to be cheap to service, cheap to repair. The engine block is designed so it can take an electric engine as well. You know, they start with a platform that costs that $20,000, and that is something that, you know, let's say, Chris, you have expertise in suspensions. All it takes is one guy somewhere in the world with expertise in something that those guys didn't have, who can make a considerable improvement, make it cost less and perform better.
But we see this all the time when we look at products that we work on every day, right? And in my trade, I work on a lot of big equipment, and I see the good and bad of all equipment, right? I see the design flaws in one particular brand, and I see the good in another. And I always say to myself, I know that they've patented that system, so the other company can't take that technology. But if I could take that, and put it together, I'd have the best.
You'd have something freaking good.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. It's about taking the best out there, the best engineering, and bringing it together. But I can't do that in where we are now because all this technology is protected. Right, it's protected. You're stopping them from using this and that. So they have to find alternatives, and those alternatives aren't always good. They're always,
And what's next on the list? DIY bio. Your headphones good?
I've lost. Yeah, that's all right. Sorry.
You hear me?
No, it's good.
All right. The next up, DIY bio. We talked about electronics and software and hardware, and this stuff is already happening with synthetic biology. People are doing genetic engineering in freaking like a meetup in I checked one in Chicago where, 4 or 5 kids and a couple of adults get together with some syringes, pipettes, centrifuges that, not very expensive equipment, and they make glowing bacteria. It's insane. Projects like this have yielded, for example, I saw one, it was cadmium sensing yeast. So in India, many of the cities had a cadmium toxicity problem in their water, and they made yeast.
Would that have something to do with a certain company that exploded?
I don't know if it's got to do with the Bhopal thing from Dow Chemical.
That was cadmium that came out of that place, wasn't it?
That would be interesting if it was, but hear me out. They make yeast. Think about this. It's not that they're now going to sell a sensor to 1,000 places in the world. The yeast multiplies itself. So they give a glass of this to the village, and they make as much yeast as they need out of that freaking glass because yeast multiplies, and they have a sensor for a lifetime.
Yep.
And that yeast, cost somebody in Chicago 2 afternoons.
Yes.
And that type of problem would be an ongoing cost of hundreds of dollars of getting sensors. I mean, you and I, we know how much it costs to test for fluoride. I think when you buy kits, it's something like $20 a test. And it's not even a precise reading. It's kind of like, we have
factors.
We have a dark dot as opposed to a slightly dark dot or a light dot, and you kind of judge yourself. Yes, there is some, and then you have to go and pay for the actual lab test.
That's it.
But
no, that's fantastic.
So this is taken onto synthetic biology is amazing and fascinating, and unfortunately, not being a biologist, it's something I'll have to look into more, and hopefully we can, get somebody that really understands this. There is no branch of DIY bio in Melbourne yet. There is one in Sydney, and when it happens, I'll certainly go down there and check it out. And finally, we have, aquaponics and urban permaculture. I mean, not exactly,
You go on.
not
Okay.
exactly officially open source projects, but they're very much based on sharing ideas. You know, like when you just Google aquaponics, there's literally thousands of people in the world that are going on YouTube showing you how they set up their systems. And the idea is you get a natural ecosystem processes and you replicate them. You have fish in the pool whose excrement is extremely fertile for plants, that water being circulated, and then actively cleaned by plants, which grow like crazy.
That's open source because I did 5 years in aquaponics,
Right.
and I've seen some big companies try to get in and manufacture filtering systems and systems, turnkey. You send the money in, they come and set it all up, and then they walk away, and then off it goes, the whole lot. But there's so many innovations out there, and people out there don't mind. It's like farming in a way. People don't mind showing you how they've solved the problems that were always coming up in those systems. So that's becoming
It's similar to your hot rod culture. I mean, it's something I know nothing about, but it's an Australian subculture where these people that love cars get together and they engineer their own modifications to old cars, and that's all about show and tell. It's all about showing everyone else how you've solved the problem, what you've done.
For sure. But you're talking a lot of money and a lot of time on those projects. But yeah, it's all about it's. I suppose you could say it's a bragging rights in a way. Look what I did. I made my car go faster, harder, and quicker down the quarter mile. But that's all innovation, and it's I suppose in some ways it's open source. A lot of those guys don't keep that stuff to themselves. They don't. Oh, look, I invented. I'm not telling anyone. They're all about telling other people.
Well, and here it is. This is the best part of our podcast. We're going to speculate onto, like some type of a future 5-10 years from today. What would happen? I mean, we talked about 9 technologies, and we're only going to use these in speculation. Arduino, the 3D printer, Parallella, quadcopters, mesh networks, open source ecology, Wikispeed, DIY synthetic biology, and
well, I'm going to draw a long
urban permaculture.
I'm going to draw a long bow on this, right? Yeah, and I know you're going to probably shake your head. But I'm looking, all these open source technologies are leading towards a resource-based economy.
Right. So, elaborate, what do you mean by resource-based economy?
Well, it's not a monetary economy. It's not based on who with the most money can get the best scientists to build the best, the product they want, which they can control and distribute it to who they want at a set price. A resource-based economy would be to supply the resources so everyone can add to that technology and make it better.
I mean, you're right. The way I see it, it is the slow, very, very slow, and inevitable death of big centralized systems. And I'm talking about, firstly, corporations, and secondly, governments. Because if it's really easy, say, to grow your own food, let's say a combination of Arduino and quadcopters makes gardening insanely easy.
Well, it makes it automates it.
Let's say not only water is automated, if a $150 drone can carry out a camera and go in precise locations, and with Parallella they have perfect 3-dimensional space vision and computer vision, they could probably do your weeding. So you have weeding. You could prune trees, destroy the weeds, probably like freaking lasers and shit. And
look,
follow me here.
I know where you're going.
This is where I'm going. Like, if growing food, like organic, healthy, juicy, fresh food becomes so easy, like what's gonna happen to McDonald's?
I can't believe you used the word fresh, organic, beautiful food, and then you just dump McDonald's right there.
But what is going to happen to McDonald's?
That would be gone tomorrow. But that becomes down to education too. I mean, a lot of people actually think that they're actually eating food when they go to McDonald's. But what I'm saying is,
well, what happens to Monsanto? Like, what happens to these giant industrial farms?
They're gone. They can't compete. But what I'm saying is, when I said the word resource-based economy, where I was getting to was it's not about money. Everyone puts a dollar tag on everything, right? Now, if this open source technology is out there, it's not about money, it's about the resources and access to them. Do I have access to the steel? Do I have access to the plastic for the 3D printer? Do I have access to these thingos? And you know what? The human race is fantastic because if we can't use metal or wood to make our product, we can use something else. We can always find an alternative, no matter what. And that's going to be innovative in itself.
Absolutely. Look, the way I see it, you mentioned resource-based economy several times. I find that is some type of nearly inevitable long-term destination. But in the foreseeable run, and I said like 5 to 10 years, the way the developments I see is less money in the system, because the food that you grow, you're not going to buy.
That's right.
The products you build, you're not going to buy. You're going to buy the raw materials, but the raw materials cost so much less than the product. So we're still operating on money.
Raw materials are cheap.
Yes.
What's a ton of iron ore worth?
I don't know, but we can look it up. Do you
know?
It's
very simple. I mean, if you go to the commodities market, you can see a ton of iron ore, right? And let's face it, if we have a 3D printer that can take raw product and print out what we want. We're talking, let's say it's $100 a ton.
Wow.
I mean, it's cheap.
But try to I'm trying to build up towards the vision that you're saying.
Okay.
And I think what you're doing is you're saying, well, this is the logical conclusion, but I see that as like 25 years away. I'm going 5 to 10.
But I've also read that 90% of the cost in anything that you buy, right, is not the raw materials and the labor that made it, or the automation and the raw materials that made it. It's the middlemen, the marketing. It's all this bullshit in between. So when we go back to, say, the 3D printer, right, depending on what we're going to make, we're taking all that away.
Absolutely.
So it makes it so cheap. I'd go and make an iPhone for myself and give one to my neighbor and my sister, or what? And while I'm doing that, there might be something else that I want that some other kid on the other side of the planet's working on, and he just sends it to my printer and prints up the microphone that I need to do what I want to do, or the glass that I want.
And I want your comment on this, because you're looking at a system where people get to invent more stuff, and all of a sudden it's no longer as we've explained, because of the less need for middlemen, because more is just manufactured at home. The big companies are losing money, losing power. And in a sense, the inventor becomes almost like a celebrity. Maybe not. Maybe they won't be famous. Maybe no one will care what fucking the guy that made the next quadcopter drone.
Well, he'll probably use his
is
name.
going to be wearing. But picture this. It's like people doing stuff themselves, which outdates something that we all have very, very, very much grown accustomed to, called jobs. Because if you're at home and your garden is automated and everything you need to survive, solar panels produce your power, your food is grown mostly in your own garden. You can swap with the neighbors. They're growing different types of things too.
They might be growing medicine plants.
Yep. You're growing. You're not paying big companies, so they're going away. But jobs. What about jobs? Because all of this automation, people used to grow the stuff, farmers professionally, and sell it to you. They're losing their jobs. People used to make those iPhones. Now you can print out, like, let's say you'd buy a subcomponent and print out most of it.
Yes.
All the people that used to assemble that now losing their jobs. The drones are delivering the mail. The postman, he's out of the picture. Shopping logistics, again, drones could it would be so much cheaper for something to airlift your groceries to your house than it is to drive there. Now,
I know this is a bit hard for people to get.
So what happens? I mean, how do we as a society deal with the fact that we can live kick-ass lives with about 2 hours, an hour and a half of work a day of maintaining the technology that we kind of have.
Yeah.
And We don't need to work. Like, it would, how would?
Well, you have all this free time to do other things.
Yeah.
To evolve, maybe. To evolve.
You know.
To move on to new ideas. I mean, the frontier of ideas is incredible. We could just move on.
It doesn't come instantly. I mean, I can say in my own life, Chris, when I was on holidays, I'd go to the beach, go out, go to the beach, play video games.
I have to excuse myself for a minute. Just keep talking.
All right, excuse yourself. But the idea of having a lot of free time, I think eventually, for most people, is going to crystallize into the realization that there are a million interesting things to do. You could explore philosophy. You could design something cool and original that's technological. You could explore art, get together with like-minded people, maybe friends, maybe neighbors, maybe someone on the other side of the world, and then try to produce a play, a movie, a picture. I don't know. This world's a wonderful, interesting place, and I think that a lot of people are failing to realize that simply because they got to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go to this job where they got to make more money, where they got to strategize how to improve their job status and make even more money. And, I think we have a world where several billion people are chasing a paycheck, and that is their, between making a living and meeting some of the needs of say, themselves and their kids, they don't have too many profound interests. They're not, perhaps it's a luxury that they can't afford to have. And I think that without jobs, as such, people would still, to survive and thrive, you would still have to put in hours of what you may call work. I mean, some people would call it play, entertainment, and fun. You'd still have to put some time in to maintain your
but I
house
think,
and environment.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day too is that I know we all struggle every day to find time to do the things that we like to do. But could you imagine if you took work out of that 8 hours, say you do 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, imagine you took that work ethic, that work thing right out of it. And I don't think it'd be long before you wouldn't have to struggle to find things to do. Like, you would find things to do.
That's what I said when you were away. You would arrive at a place, there's only so much video games that you could play, that at some point even, being lazing out in the sun on the beach gets boring. You actually go oh man, I want to, I want to do something interesting, I want to read up on something I've never read about before.
Well, I can give you a perfect example. I mean, I've been working for the last 20-something years, and I've just gone back to school to do a couple of courses, and, and they're courses in things that I want to do, right? As in, they're not things that I don't want to do. And when I went back to school, I thought, geez, and I saw these other courses that other people were doing, other subjects, and I'm thinking, I'd love to do that, but I don't have the time to do it. It's not part of my job, but I don't have time. But, there's things out there that I would love to go back to school and learn tomorrow that have nothing to do with my income. But I simply don't have the time or the money to pay for that course, because the time I'd be doing the course, obviously I'd have to be earning money because of my bills and stuff. So I think to a point, it's like my father said, when I retire, he says to me, when I retire, I'll get bored and sit on the couch. And I'm thinking, no, you won't. Because, he loves fishing. Well,
he might.
No,
wait, I'm sorry.
He loves fishing, but he said, I can't fish 24/7. I can't play golf every day of the week. I get bored with it. Well, you're right. Your dad
has a point. I mean, there are so many people. It's like a phenomenon in the society that people retire and die within the first 4
Oh, yeah,
years.
we've spoken about this, but the problem is too is that I don't think I think there's a lot of depression there because your whole life you've been active in the mind. Because any job you do really, it's active in the mind and physical to a certain extent, depending on your job. But all of a sudden you drop out of that and you don't have to worry about it, and all of a sudden you feel worthless because you don't know what to do with the time that you have.
I have a theory on why this is, and maybe it's a good time to reference. There was a local event called Z-Day in Melbourne, and I did a presentation on education, and I said one of the most wrong things with the system is that even, schools in Victoria explicitly say that kids need to be subjected to higher institutionalized forms of management where their motivation is increasingly extrinsic. This is a quote from... It means that people like your father are being motivated by extrinsic factors. Like, for 99% of people, it's the manager that says you must achieve this week. And that's kind of where your motivation comes from. It's not from within. What am I interested in? What do I believe in? What is amazing? And even people that own their own business, I think like your father, is just going, well, I've got all these loans, and to pay these loans I need to make more money, and that's my thing, I got to pay my workers. And the motivation, even though he may not have a manager, it's still this extrinsic motivation.
I think the other thing too is if you look at, use my father's example, from the age of 16 he's worked right in a factory, right, and he's 67, 68 now, right. He's conditioned, man. You can't. It's like being in prison. You can't every day of the week, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You're working 8 to 12 hours, right, in this environment, and then all of a sudden, it stops, and you've got these days of the week, and your mind's struggling, and you're feeling guilty that you're not doing something with you're not producing, because I think as you go to work, you're producing something, you're manufacturing a product, and you're making money, and I just find that conditioning is that you feel guilt.
It is, and if you look at it's called behavioral operant conditioning. It's behaviorism. I mean, it's not even an educational theory. It's a human behavior fact that once you have done a particular action, having received rewards for it again and again and again and again, say over 50 to 100 times.
But I think those people have forgotten the goal.
You become subconscious. It's not, I need to do this because of these reasons. It no longer has any logic attached to it. But it becomes, I go there, I feel good. I don't go there, I feel bad.
I feel bad, yeah. I think so, and that's conditioning. But the other thing too is at the start when he first started his job, I'm sure I'm going to go to work, I'm going to work hard, save my money, so one day when I retire, I can relax and I don't have to worry about those bills and those the mortgage, all the things that you have to worry about while you're thinking, and I can retire. But it's gone past that now. It's got to the point now that I don't know what to do with myself. I really don't know what to do with myself. I've never done anything else but this. I mean, that's sad. I think it's sad, but anyway. I hope you're not watching, Dad. But anyway, let's finish up here. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about next episode.
Well, I think do you have 10 minutes or not?
No, I don't.
Oh, well. All right. The 3D printer then is gonna... I'll add it on. I'll do it myself. I'll kind of show people how it works. I'll add it on at the end of this episode. But the next one, we've got two of our friends, sort of loosely lined up for future podcasts. We have a guy called Van Harris, who's a part of Beyond Zero Emissions. And I think we'll be talking about global warming, and it'll be super interesting because, the guy is an activist for action on global warming, and I personally am a bit of a skeptic. Then there is a lovely lady called Theo Kitchener, who's started two sort of local organizations. One's called The Sharehood, and another's called Doing It Ourselves. That is all about, DIY food production, DIY power production, DIY gardening, DIY all types of things, free sharing of resources. Except she's coming at it, from a much more low-tech model than say what I think, but it'd be very, she also has an interest in peak oil. So that will be very interesting. And look, I can definitely say these will happen sometime in the next 2 months. And also, so we don't know exactly what the next one will be, but also we're planning to do a podcast on the most loaded term in the English language, and that term being conspiracy theory. I find that it is, like that example of Chris's father. Don't go to work, feel bad. Go to work, feel good. When people hear something a bit out there, something that's unfamiliar to their everyday experience, they associate it with this word conspiracy theory and go, crazy person.
I think we're going to talk about the psychology. Why we think when someone says something that's outside of the status quo, right? And or outside of your understanding of technology or news, straight away, as a dismissive, to blow it off is, that's conspiracy theory, and not questioning or wanting to know more about the subject, or even to go back after speaking to that person or that subject, go back and study the subject to see if there's anything in it. But straight away, just to go into that reaction of, that's all conspiracy theory,
because
that's a lot of bunk.
Whatever, we'll start it off with a definition. I mean, I don't know, I'll literally go on 5 dictionaries and then figure out what they say, because, there must be hundreds of places, whatever definition you use, that this definition should apply, but it's never used. Like, say, the court of law. The guy, the
Well, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, the persecutor has to come up. I mean, we are talking...
Prosecutor or persecutor?
Prosecutor.
We're talking about the judge or the...
Yeah, the prosecutor. He has imperfect information. He's got to take these and connect these dots.
Oh, yeah.
And if he has imperfect information, and he's connecting it into some type of a nefarious event that the defendant's supposed to be involved in, I mean...
Isn't that conspiracy theory?
I think it should be, by any definition, a conspiracy theory, and yet, we don't go to court and call those people conspiracy theorists. We apply it to people that, rather than that defendant who's in the court, apply it to, say, a corporation or the government, and we want to put that label on them. And
can I give another example?
Go for it.
I'd like to give another example. Last night, I was out in the backyard, and I saw something in the sky. Right, and I'm 100% sure it was a UFO. Right.
Oh, okay.
Wait.
You saw something that you can't identify in the sky.
Well, that's what it is. That's what. Yeah. See, that's what a UFO is. It's an unidentified flying object, right? But straight away, your thing would be little green men from Mars, right? Yeah. Straight away.
Crazy.
The next thing would be, I'll keep talking to him while I'm ringing the hospital. Right. So what we want to know is, it's not the little green men in the sky or the UFO. What puts that in your head straight away? What is the psychology behind that to say, he's a conspiracy theorist, he's not following the status quo. The status quo goes, little green men from Mars, that's laughable, that's funny, it doesn't exist. Instead of questioning the reality, the physics, the evidence.
And look, it could be an optical illusion, laser in the sky, balloon, it doesn't freaking matter. But I would say that if somebody's looking at inexplicable things in the sky and not being curious about it, I think that something's wrong with... I mean, it's like...
Well, I think you've been conditioned. I think you've been conditioned by the media to believe that anything that's outside the ordinary is either magic. We know magic is not real.
Yeah.
Well, what is magic? Is magic something that you can't explain? I mean, is it? I mean, if I got a cigarette lighter and I went to the middle of the jungle in Papua New Guinea, where people have never met white man, and I managed to flick that lighter in my hand, and he saw the flame. He knows what the flame is because he's used it before, but he thinks that that's magic because I've produced fire from my hand.
Yep.
Well, I know the technology behind it. I know how it works, but to him that's magic. And there's another. It's outside his
life experience.
Yeah, his life experience or the facts that he can put together. So straight away he's going, that's all bunk.
Well, I think we've given the people out there, a pretty good preview, and I reckon that whenever
I think it's going to be
happens.
funny. I think
it will be funny. I think it will be
It's
funny.
hilarious.
All right, so at this point, we bid you all a lovely farewell. I hope you enjoyed this podcast.
And we want to see some comments. We've
We've actually gotten a few. So.
we've got a few comments, and we believe that our show's right on the mark because we've had a USA pageant girl write us
I think Miss Arkansas.
Miss Arkansas wrote us a comment, and she says that she understands us. So I'm not saying good or bad, but if Miss Arkansas can understand two Australians in someone's bedroom talking about technology, then it can't be that hard to comprehend.
Yeah, at least on the level of actually, making this digestible for most people. I think we're doing all right.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Goodbye and good luck.
Factor E form, you gotta see this to believe this. New technology and the genius to start from scratch and ask what makes our survival clock tick. Pretty soon they had a tractor and a machine that made bricks. Now they all in, placing their bet on what they call a global village construction set. 50 machines for a civilization, and every machine designed for simple replication. So is there a catch? Well, of course, but it ain't what you think. The catch is that it's open source, open to all, no patents, no monopoly. A new movement, open source ecology, free collaboration with like-minded folks. A global network, the skills to fill the spokes. A project to provide the plans to change history. Consumer scale, manufacture renewable energy, turning this new tech into solutions. In every sense of the word, a revolution. Open up economy, I'll open up economy, I'll open source ecology, I'll open source ecology. Go check it out if you doubt this. You want a better world, but you time with your mouth is. Open up economy, I'll open up economy, I'll open source ecology, I'll open source ecology. Go check it out if you doubt this. You want a better world, but you time with your mouth. So let me paint a picture in your head about the bread we could save if this model were to spread. Consumer scale means neighborhood production, low overhead energy and resource reduction, more efficient and democratic distribution, less transportation, less factories, less pollution, fair prices based on cost, no middleman. Introduce a middle finger to the invisible hand and understand that's only the industrial economy. Imagine the potential for fighting world poverty. Put a global village construction setting the poor down, let them learn the system, replicate and pass it down. All they need is the knowledge, plans and raw materials, no import nightmares or dealing with imperial ambitions. Conditions on IMF flows let the developing world develop on their own. You teach a man to fish and still keep him in debt, or create a system unless it produces on nets. Open up economy, I'll open up economy, I'll open source ecology, I'll open source ecology. Go check it out if you doubt this. You want a better world, put your time with your mouth is. Open up economy, I'll open up economy, I'll open source ecology, I'll open source ecology. Go check it out if you doubt this. You want a better world, put your time with your mouth is. Awake economy, open source ecology, whatever you call it, it's the future of economy. So if you serious about your intentions of economic justice and meaningful change, pay attention. With open source, we ain't gotta fight or ask permission. We do it on slide, bypass the whole system. The fastest non-violent way to end monopoly over the means of production, intellectual property. Where before they just buy you off or break your jaw, they can't compete with the internet and Moore's law. You got a dream team, but working in secret will never beat the free exchange of hungry minds working together. And once a product's open source, it's open source forever. And as the technology explodes, it gets better and better. Interactive software for easy customization, gamification of open source tech, education, preparation. We can't sleep on the challenges coming. You wanna organize around something? How about today when the majority of workers in every nation will be replaced by robotics and automation? In one scenario, the rich own all the patents, throw us in the trash. In the other, there's enough open source that we still got a chance to create new democratic structures for supply and demand. I know the irony is too delicious to stand. The worldwide flow of info will be the Trojan horse. Welcome to a better world, and guess what? It's yours. Welcome to a better world, and guess what? It's yours. Welcome to a better world. It's open source. Open up economy, I'll open up economy, I'll